I think today paid advertising is mostly creative led. Everyone's using the same tactics. The competition is at the marketing level. It becomes about who can resonate with their target audience the most. If we onboard a new client, it's like 3 weeks from contract to launch. And in those 3 weeks, I personally interview their customers. If you look at other industries like D2C, e-commerce, user-generated content is working so well. We're actually starting to see that happening in B2B now, where influencer-led content, creator-led content, stuff like that. You look at companies like Cognism, where they have creators on a retainer that are creating content for them.
Welcome to the In the Pit podcast. I'm your host, Cody Schneider. Today, I'm talking to Liam Dunn. Liam runs a marketing agency that specializes in B2B SaaS ads, but he takes a really interesting approach to this where he gets in the heads of the customers of his clients. He'll actually do calls with them, and he believes this is how you create way better ad creative that's going to be more performant for your brand. This episode is brought to you by Podcast Guest Launch. Podcast Guest Launch helps you get guest appearances on podcasts so that you can grow your brand. They handle all the research, all of the reach out, and a scheduled event just shows up on your calendar. I've been using them for the last couple months, and I've been on over 20 different shows at this point. It's built insanely powerful backlinks for my company, Swell AI. I get to tap into the trust of that podcast's audience, and I get to talk about my company in front of that audience. And then the other benefit I get from it is I can take all of these video recordings and I can repurpose that into content that I can use across all of my social channels. Go to podcastguestlaunch.com to learn more, or just click the link in the description. This show is also brought to you by Swell AI, the AI content marketing platform. Record conversations with industry experts in your niche, and then turn those videos into clips, blog posts, newsletters, and more. In minutes, you can make all the content you need for an entire week from a single piece of pillar content. This is the most effective way I've found to grow early stage startups. You can sign up for Swell AI for free at swellai.com or click the link in the show notes. All right, let's get started with today's show. Dude,
Nice.
Stoked to meet you. I think I saw like a LinkedIn post and it was sick what you were talking about. That's why I reached out, but I know nothing. So give me some high level background. I'd love to hear it.
Okay, cool. So the name's Liam. I'm currently the founder of DigiSeed and a couple of related ventures. DigiSeed is a marketing agency. We exclusively work with B2B SaaS companies, primarily focusing on paid media and outbound. But there's kind of like a subcategory there of like messaging and positioning, because in my opinion, it's the secret to success on those channels. Before DigiSeed, I worked in-house at a couple of SaaS companies, ranging from real like early stage, joining at around team size of 10. And then before that, working at team size of hundreds as an SDR. So first job in SaaS was as an SDR, and then joined the early stage startup and as a generalist, handling customer success, handling sales, getting involved in the product roadmap. You know how it is, just kind of
doing everything.
Yeah, basically doing everything that isn't on the job description, that kind of thing.
Of course, right? There's always like 2 or 3 people that are in every early stage company, under 30 people that are basically that. It's just like figure out all the shit, all the puzzles or whatever.
Just get given a problem and figure it out. Because that was a surprise. Going from like a company with hundreds of employees where there's an onboarding process, you know what you're doing for the first 4 weeks, and there's a process for everything, to a startup where it's like, oh, hey, we don't have this. And it's like, well, create it. So yeah, very, very, very
exactly.
different environment.
Totally. I think it's always a culture shock too. They want you to make those decisions, right? Where it's like, you kind of have that power in your hands suddenly. I don't know. So just for context, my background, I worked in like early stage companies for forever now. That's like what I've done. My background's in basically like building distribution once they found PMF. So we'd like come in and help them kind of spin up like their content engine and all like paid ads and anything else that was in that realm. Now we're working on like a new company that's content repurposing that's powered by AI. So that's kind of the world that we're living in, because we're seeing it just be like this crazy powerful tool for all these early stage companies.
There's a lot of AI related tools being launched at the moment. So you're riding the right wave.
Trying to. I mean, it's so competitive. I think that's the one thing that no one talks about is like, because it's this base level technology, like everybody is competing, and you're also fighting Microsoft, which is like this whole other animal in its own right. So anyway, yeah, man. So how big is your team currently? And like, I saw you said you deployed, I think it was like a couple million in ad spend for B2B SaaS companies. I feel like a lot of the times these companies think that like paid ads is like a shit channel, because they're like, oh, it's super competitive, blah, blah, blah. And like, I think that thing that I saw that really jumped out at me is you're like, hey, you're just doing the narrative wrong of the actual ad. So I'd love to learn more about that and kind of like your strategy that you're seeing be effective.
Yeah, yeah. So we're just a handful of people at the moment, like moving lean and fast. Something that startup I worked at has really paid dividends because I learned a couple of lessons, and I'll get onto the question, but just to provide context, like
Yeah,
they
no,
were
please.
they were low funded, so they kind of raised like a pre-seed slash seed round, and they were like extremely profitable, and everything was like we didn't throw money at problems. It was like be scrappy, I'd so I worked directly with the founder. I was like, hey, we need this tool. And he's like, no, 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 like figure a way to do it without the tool. And I've kind of carried
Nice.
that philosophy on into my company and like the clients I work with, where, we don't need to get the shiny newest tools. It's really just like doing the fundamentals right. And I guess
100%.
segues naturally. So I think where we focus is we have a big focus on like messaging and creative development. So if you look at like media buying, paid advertising, whatever you want to call it, if you look at historically, it's always been like a technical thing, like a technical skill. People obsess over like bidding strategies, campaign structures. People love to really geek out about those things. But I think today, all of that stuff is like table stakes, right? You could watch YouTube, binge watch YouTube on a weekend, and you've probably learned like the most things for media buying, like all the technical stuff.
Yeah, you're
And
80% competent at that point. Like,
exactly. And so what that means is like, well, everyone knows that stuff now, right? And so everyone's running the same playbook. And so I think today where most companies, especially B2B SaaS companies where they have like a longer sales cycle, I think where they see I think today paid advertising is mostly creative led, because if everyone's using the same tactics, the competition is at the marketing level. It becomes about, who can resonate with their target audience the most, who can deliver the most potent message that resonates, who can build trust, who can build likability. And I think that's how you're going to succeed. So I didn't actually get into this game with that being the intention. I kind of just worked back to like first principles. I was like, well, hey,
that's awesome.
yeah. And
I
just
didn't
to
realize you
really,
were that deep, like where you're like talking to them, like just to understand like their customer profile, et cetera. That's amazing.
yeah, absolutely. And I mean, we use AI as part of that, right? To analyze the transcript of the call and draw insights and kind of like categorize them. So, oh, hey, this is a potential anxiety or potential motivation. And then we use that in our marketing. But then again, what companies do wrong is they do these exercises and that's it. It's checking the box. Hey, yeah, we spoke with customers. And then it doesn't really like the feedback loop doesn't get closed. And so what we do is we collate those insights into what I call a messaging Bible, which is essentially like, hey, here are the people you are targeting. Here are the problems they have, their fears, wants, dreams. And here's how you can kind of speak to those through your messaging. And so why I call it the messaging Bible is because it's like our source of truth for our marketing campaigns. And so if we want to like target persona A, we know exactly what persona A cares about. And so then we can like speak directly to those pain points or those desires. It just enables us to create campaigns that really like, and this is such a cliche saying, like, but cut through the noise, because you just got to look at a few companies' ads and they use the same words like, supercharged, revolutionary,
100%.
and all this kind of stuff. And to the point where they're even using like the same graphics. And so as consumers, as buyers, we build these patterns, we build this tolerance up to these things. And so we just switch off. And so, in contrast to that, companies that can sort of break the mold and, just speak to people in a language that resonates with them rather than trying to do this corporate BS, that's where we see the success.
100%. It's super interesting too, because you're like, it's almost novel if they're seeing all the same thing from all of the competitors. Like if all the competitors are using same graphics, same language, like when you have something that's different, it's going to like stick out even further, right? So it's like going to create a higher CTR than the other things that they're seeing on a daily basis. I love that of using the AI to like identify those pain points. I'm just thinking about it, like even with our own campaigns that we're running, like, we're bidding on these keyword phrases and I'm just like, I spun this up over like a weekend. So I just did exact match keywords in there. But like what we really should be doing is like talking to those, like what they're actually trying to get done. Like they're trying to automate XYZ process and like referencing that within it so that they like it's communicating and rather than just like, going after the click. Do you see it decreases the CPC when you do this? Like when you create like this like more in-depth thing, like it's like, the ROI worth it, like kind of within the data, or how are you convincing clients that like this is the thing that we need to do? I guess is maybe another way to ask that.
Yeah, so it definitely reduces costs, and that's why we do it because, well, reducing costs means we get better results and overall efficiency. But the reason why I implemented this is honestly because I didn't trust the what the clients we're working with have already done. And let me elaborate on that. There's a reason if you're
Yeah,
a
please.
company and you engage like an agency, a consultant, or something like that, there's a reason you are engaging them because you're probably not doing something right or you're looking to do something better. And so I don't want to start working with these companies and just follow the status quo. I'm not going to follow what you've already been doing because then I'm just going to get the same results and I'm just going to get fired. And and so the reason why I introduced this kind of concept of the messaging Bible is because it's like that's great if you guys have already done this, but I'm going to do it myself and kind of, give a fresh perspective and a second opinion. And normally we find things that they haven't. But yeah, it absolutely reduced costs. Like, and the thing is, it's not sexy. There's no like, dark magic. Some of the things we uncover are really just like kind of how didn't we notice that? Or yeah, that's so obvious. Like clearly they care about this
It's
thing. And
obvious. Yeah.
yeah, and it really could just be like specific words that the customers use, or so we even go through like depending on their target audience, we'll also go on forums like Reddit, and again we'll analyze those Reddit posts with AI to pick up like are there common
Super
words they're
interesting.
using to explain things? What's the precise syntax they are using? Because the way I look at marketing, especially like messaging, is and it really does depend, if you're targeting like lawyers, this is going to change. But I think you really just need to explain concepts to people in a casual language that they understand. And the analogy I use is like
Totally.
if you're in like a bar with a colleague or friend, how would you explain this product to them? Well, that's how we should explain it in our marketing. And so by looking at those language patterns, whether it be in voice of customer interviews, whether it be looking on Reddit or private WhatsApp communities, you can see how people are talking about their problems, talking about their desires and motivations, and that's exactly the language you want to then use in your marketing. So it absolutely reduces costs because it's they come across your ads and like, oh, okay, this actually resonates with me, rather than this product is clearly pitching me and they don't know some copyright and written by like a junior team member who doesn't really understand the market. So yeah, the whole we don't do that extra work for the fun of it. It's really just to increase efficiency on like paid ads.
No, that makes total sense. It's interesting to like. I mean, it's so true though, right? Like the language that you use, like it basically it shows that you're an insider. So like, there's trust that's built into that as well. Like if I'm being spoken to in that like language that I'm using on a daily basis, like of course I'm going to be more receptive to that because it's like, oh, this person actually understands the problem, especially if they're like talking about the problem as well. So it's like language I'm using and identifying the problem that I have. Like they obviously it makes you feel like, oh, this company is like a part of like this
Yeah, yeah.
ecosystem, which is what everybody wants to work with, like somebody that actually feels like they're there and present. But
I think it's like it feels more personal. For example, if you were to run two experiments, say you were a founder of a company and you were to run two experiments. Experiment A was posting content on your personal profile on LinkedIn or Twitter. Experiment B was posting content on your company profile. The personal profile is probably, and people have run these experiments, is probably going to perform better because it's coming from a human rather than this kind of logo, this corporate logo. And it's just that like human touch. People are so used to being sold to. Like there's actually this thing in the world of UX UI called banner blindness. And it can relate to marketing where, for example, like pop-ups, once upon a time, pop-ups used to be really effective. They'd have like an 80% opt-in rate because people are like, wow, what's this? Whereas today, you barely even notice them, but because you've seen them so much, you've become blind to them. I think it's the exact same in like paid advertising, companies using the same words and stuff like that. People have just been like burned so many times that they just honestly just their brain doesn't even like process it. It's just like ignore.
totally. I mean, it's kind of the classic thing where it's like as like new marketing gets introduced, like it's novel, and so we're more receptive to it. Like email marketing, like cold email used to rip, like back in like 2016 in particular, when it was like still fresh for like people to get an email that felt like it came from like a Gmail. Like now it's like everybody has instantly AI and they're doing this at scale, and it's just like the shotgun
Yeah.
approach. But I mean, that's even why we're like I'm even doing this podcast, right? Is like because it's still a novel thing. Like what we found is that when we cold email people a podcast like episode link, like we're getting open rates at like 40%. And so we just like scraped our whole target audience ICP, and then we're just like cold emailing them the episodes. And like CTRs are 5%, open rates 40%. It's like ridiculous, right? Because it doesn't feel like marketing yet. But fast forward 2 years from now, like there's 100% chance that it's going to feel like marketing and like be in the mind of people, right? So they'll have that banner blindness, but for this thing. So it kind of interesting to connect those ideas. It made me think of another thing too. I saw recently like more of Gen Z is starting to use TikTok as their search engine. And like what they quoted as being the reason for that is because there's like a human behind the information that's being passed on to them. So it's not just like this faceless brand. It's like, oh, here's this individual. So if like Tom tells me something and it's total bullshit, like I can go back and point at Tom and be like, oh, this guy's full of shit, rather than, having this like nameless, faceless company that's like trying to feed me this information. So I feel like there's like more and more of a movement to that now of like almost this like raw type of media that feels like way less like buttoned up. Like we're seeing this, like a lot of our clients are like, they're in the YouTube space and they're telling us like, hey, we're seeing content that looks like it's almost like that vlog format where it's like raw, like unedited, less polished is performing better from a reach standpoint. So just kind of an interesting trend. Like I feel like those trends are related in a way where like they're trying, it's kind of the similar things are happening. But I'm curious your thoughts on that, or like what you guys are seeing.
Yeah, same. Like, so I actually started posting. I kind of made a decision to go all in on content, and an executive decision, like a few months back or something. And one of those, like as part of that, I decided to like rip some TikTok, and like my best performing videos are literally just like fire from the hip. I was walking to the co-working spot, and you can hear the traffic behind me, construction site, and I'm just
Totally.
just speaking raw into the camera. And that account, I think I went from like zero fresh account. I don't even go on TikTok. I just use it for to post content. And I think we went from like 0 to 1,000 followers in like 3 weeks or something. And then of course I tried to change things, and so growth slowed down a bit. But yeah, I did the same on LinkedIn. I actually posted the same videos on both platforms, two birds with one stone. Exact same. People really resonating with it. Like, oh, love this kind of this raw take, because everything does feel very scripted, high production, polished. And again, I think naturally, I don't know, it must be something at our core, but we just hate being sold to. It's like when we think of sales, we think of that slimy car salesman who's just trying to squeeze us for
100%.
as much juice as possible. And when people get an inkling that they're being sold to, that's it. It's kind of game up. And so, yeah, I think they appreciate like the raw format. I think it's also why, if you look at other industries like D2C e-commerce, why like user generated content is working so well, because again, it's like,
Totally.
I think we are getting to that stage where it's again, it's losing its effectiveness, but
It's probably getting saturated or getting close. Like people know now more, but
exactly. But it worked really well. And we're actually starting to see that happening in B2B now, where influencer-led content, creator-led content, stuff like that. You look at companies like Cognism, where I don't know if they hire them full time, but they have like creators on a retainer that are like creating content for them. And I think, especially for like demand creation, people.
What's his name? Obeyed, or I can't. He now works at Hockey Stack, but I think he kind of is like really, I think, charging ahead with this idea. I think it's just a natural progression. Like we saw D2C companies where they had like full-time content creators on salary. And like a company that actually did this really well, I thought, was Veed.io, where they like hired like the job description was like YouTuber, right? And this person, like their job was like they had to do, I think it was like 1 or 2 videos a week that was just like showing how to use the product, like based off of target keywords related that are like valuable to the brand. But I see that like I feel like this is just like the natural evolution of this is we're going to have these people that are in-house, or it's like you're just going to be a freelancer and you work for, we'll say 5 different brands, right? And you're like on salary, or sorry, you're on some type of retainer with them. And your requirement is like, oh, you got to do XYZ amount of videos or content per month for that company. Like, I think that's just where we're headed with all this. So
absolutely. Like, so you mentioned Instantly. I work with them like over the last like year and a half. And so we run their paid media, and we've kind of built it from the ground up. And like, without a doubt, one of the biggest impacts there is their like organic content. So what the guys did in the early days on like even Twitter, and now more so on YouTube, they have like full-time creators. So that the founders don't even like create content anymore, I think. And it's mostly full-time creators. And, even I have them at my disposal as well. And so we can just pump out like content. These people are just going to record content all the time. And I think that's really like the secret to succeeding in paid media is just having a lot of
amazing, man.
content and
Fuck.
distributing like a good narrative. Because this is why, if we want to like break it down, this is why it works, is because I don't know, people have this mentality that for somebody to buy software, they're just going to like click an ad and purchase. And like, that's not how it happens. Like, especially if your software's worth thousands of dollars or pounds, what really happens is they probably have to see multiple ads. They're probably going to go to your website. They're probably going to go to like YouTube. They're going to check you out. And so all of these touch points really influence that purchase decision. And so the more places you are and the more relevant and kind of potent your messages, like via your content, has this halo effect that positively impacts your paid media, because people come across your ad and like, oh, I know these guys. I've seen them. I've been watching their YouTube videos, or I've seen the founder on LinkedIn. And so the likelihood of them converting from that ad increases significantly. In contrast to that, if you're an absolute nobody, like your company, you have minimal social proof, you have minimal brand affinity, really you just look like every other product in your category, then
Totally.
you're going to struggle to convert, right? You're going to be paying a lot. Your acquisition costs are going to be really high. And so, yeah, I think like I'm a big advocate for this. Like, I think if you want to succeed in like paid media, you need to be out there. You need to be building trust with the market. You need to be, when, for example, if I think of like lead data, although there are so many providers out there, I think of the big ones. I think of like Apollo, who has so much community engagement. I think of Cognizant, who has a really good content engine. I think of like, the incumbents like ZoomInfo, Lusher, although ZoomInfo is kind of getting a bit of shade at the moment. And the reason why I think of them is because they're everywhere. They put such an effort into demand creation. So
Totally.
yeah, it's a big unlock, I think.
I think you're going to have to as well, right? Like, it's easier than ever to build software. Like, we see competitors spun up that are like direct clones of what we're building on a weekly basis at this point. Some indie hacker over a weekend can hack together like an API wrapper with a Tailwind front end, right? Like, it's the only way that like you're going to be able to differentiate and be like, okay, the trust is built into this company is to have that media that you produce. We've just like started to really double down on like influencer marketing in particular, largely like on YouTube, just because we've seen that like that's where like our audience goes for educational material. And so, to your point, like it's this, there's a trust that's built into that when it's like, oh, I see 20 different people that have all done like videos on this like software. So it's not just like some new thing, right? It's like a way to 0 to 1 brand and a totally like, I honestly, like every early stage founder I talk to at this point, I'm like, you have to have some type of content as like your mechanism. Like if you're trying to build brand that has trust, where it's like the purchasing decision time horizon is long, like in like B2B SaaS is, where, we're in a deal right now where it's like we've been talking to them for like 6 months, right? And like that's like normal, right? Like it's going to take that long for some of these like newer things, but we have to figure out ways to like interact with them during that whole period. Like how are we interacting with the team? And like content has been the vehicle for that, right? Like we basically have like, we targeted all of them on like across all social channels. And then we're just like running basically like testimonial ads and like tutorial videos and like, all this stuff to them so that we can stay top of mind and like just show like, oh, this is a real company that's like present in the market. And yeah, I think that this like we're in this transactional moment previously, like, even 5 years ago with like Google ads, it's like you just turn them on and get signups, right? And like less and less is happening in that space now. I think it's like more and more you're going to have to double down. And it makes sense, right? Like D2C is always like in front of B2B, and like we're just like following the coattails of D2C. And like they've been doing this for forever. Like, so of course it's going to work in this space. But like that's the arbitrage currently. It's also just I think for a lot of people it's a fucking headache, is like, how do I produce, content for all of these channels that I'm supposed to be on? And they're like trying to figure out, okay, like what are the 1 or 2 things I can do? Or they just like they go like everywhere and it makes no impact because they're doing too much rather than just like focusing on like one of them. But I'm curious, like, how are you guys doing content? Is it like just you, or is it like, do you have team members, or like what are kind of the trends that you're seeing, especially in like the service business space, like to communicate and like be present and in top of mind for like, lead gen?
Yeah, just me. So it's not something I would outsource. I kind of view that as like the crown jewels. It's like that's what puts food on the table. As in, I think to stand out with content, you have to develop like a distinct voice. And there's nobody who is going to be more passionate about subjects than the person who's like, leading the ship. And so I think I think that's a grave mistake to make, is like trying to outsource it. So you asked like what sort of trends we're seeing. Well, the kind of trends I'm seeing, just like not even service-based businesses themselves. So I think just the ability to be able to create like a really strong narrative. So having unique viewpoints. So if you look at people who grow, if you look at like the 20%, the people who grow faster than everyone else, they're sometimes contrarian. And I don't mean in like a negative way, right? They're not like bad people, but they're confident to put their head above the parapet and like say things or challenge like the status quo. And I think that creates like a really loyal following, rather than just like regurgitated things and platitudes that everyone else is posting. And I think like redistributing your content or reformatting it and distributing it to other platforms. And this is a common mistake companies make, is they put so much effort into creating a content. Could be just like, one post, could be like a blog post, could be like a white paper. They put all this effort into creation. And then when it comes to distribution, they're like, we put so much effort into this, it's really good. They'll come. Kind of like, build and they'll come mindset. And so like what I like to do is create. So I'll usually come up with like one idea. And I've really systemized this, because one of the there's like two objections to creating content. I don't have time, and I'm scared of what people will think. Really, they fit into those two buckets. And so you need to tackle the latter. With the first one, it's all about systems. And so usually I have like one idea, and I might turn that idea into like a written post. I might then record like a Loom video where I've turned that written post into like a flow chart. And then out of like one video, say if I create like a 10-minute Loom video, we can turn that into maybe 4 to 6 short forms that then get posted as reels on my Instagram, that then get posted as TikTok posts. And then what I do is so my kind of KPI I'm trying to achieve at the moment is like a YouTube video every 3 weeks for this year. And so say that topic I create a Loom video for, well, I'll just like really drill into like a specific topic. So if you're talking about like cold outbound, there's so like the 10-minute Loom video might be, here's how to set up your infrastructure. Like you need good targeting, you need good messaging. Whereas you could just create a 40-minute YouTube video on how to set up your infrastructure, or how to, use different data providers to get good lead lists. And so you're kind of, it starts with like one idea, but you can create so many individual pieces of content from it, rather than just like reinventing the wheel all the time. So that's kind of what I'm seeing, is using platforms like TikTok, Instagram for like top of funnel, just to build awareness, maybe be a bit contrarian, or talk about those viewpoints that, you really believe in. Could be like trend related, could be problem related. So like something I focus on a lot is like go-to-market efficiency, as, companies have gone from like sort of growth at all costs to now like efficient growth. And so I have some like viewpoints that I believe in there. Like, so one of them is the old way of cold outbound is dead. And so, and then I'm like, okay, well, I can say that 100 different times, 100 different ways, sorry. And then, okay, well, I can either say that in a written post, video, or even like I could talk it about you right now. And then that's a piece of content. And so, yeah, I think like distributing it to those platforms. So like top of funnel. And then how I visualize this in my head is, if they want like longer form, more competency based content, then that's my YouTube. I'm like low prod on YouTube. I don't have crazy editing. It's just like me talking through a document. And then that's like my middle of funnel. That's kind of like the conversion mechanism. And then it's, the book a cool funnel. So that's how I'm running it.
I love that idea though, of like, I have these like pillar contrary ideas, and I just remix it 100 times. And like, that's my whole year basically. And then just do that in different, like platform native pieces of content, like whether it's shorts or it's, long form video, etc. It's super. So Swell, this is like basically what we're building, but specifically in the podcast and like fireside chat space. So like our like basically content repurposing powered by AI. So it's like, I'm going to, for example, like take this podcast, we'll put it in there. We'll write an article based on it, tweets, LinkedIn posts, we'll also make clips, and then like schedule them to social all on the platform. So then like clips from this will then go to like all the channels. And so it's funny to hear you say that same thing. Like you're like doing, a really similar thing, but in like a different kind of like initial long form content form, like that the kind of origin of the source media is different. So I do feel like it's this like larger arcing trend that like all founders are starting to realize, like it's this massive lever for them to create like just honestly just demand gen and inbound and trust. And like for early stage companies in particular, like B2B SaaS, it feels like this is a no brainer. Like again, like something I've seen work really effectively is just like scrape all your target customers, do a podcast where you interview like industry experts that they would like want to hear from, and then just like cold emailing them like those like podcast episodes. Like again, we've seen that like, so what we do is like we sequence in like 200 emails per day to a newsletter. And then we have like an automation where like a previous episode gets sent automatically. So then they get like added to that actual like newsletter. And so like in a month, we can add like 5,000 emails to a newsletter. And like the content that we're doing is just like interviewing basically people like you. And then, you know, that's what goes out to them. And like, that's the whole kind of
like
flywheel.
this flywheel.
That happens.
That's so interesting. And they just have like this drip feed of clips.
Exactly. And then every week, like as new episodes come up, they get an email. Then we also like target them across all social channels. And then we'll just like spin up new shows as like we identify more ICPs. So like one, like, you know, we're doing right now is like for podcast producers, like we saw that they're decision makers, obviously. And then another one that we're starting to experiment with is like social media managers at like churches, because they like film all of the like church, whatever. Yeah. And then they're, you know, basically trying to create clips for social. And that's like, we found to be this other type of customer. So like for them, it's like, okay, cool. Well, like we go make some type of media, like some type of show that's like dedicated to them where we're like interviewing the best people and they tell their stories, blah, 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 and then distribute it to it. And that creates this like inbound engine. But yeah, man, I feel like this is just like the future with all this is this, especially in the B2B space, it's just the like content produced like by the founders in some way. And just anecdotally, like something that we saw, like I was working with this company that was they were a CRM for like the insurance space. And for them, like they like, you know, had great product. Nobody knew they existed. It's like kind of an old like handshake industry where like decisions are made by like who you know. So we ended up doing this podcast, and like 12 months later, they were at like a conference and people were like, "Oh, I recognize you from the podcast. I don't know how I got on your list, but like I love what you're doing." And then that turns into like new customers for them, right? So it's just like this way, and it's crazy. I mean, it's what everybody's talking about, right? But like, if you can week over week be in somebody's ears for like 30 minutes, like how much trust is built in that? It's like, it's just so powerful. So anyway,
I'm sure, you know, as somebody who cold emails, like the difference, the contrast between somebody who comes inbound and like has consumed your content versus somebody from like a cold email, very, very different. You know, usually depending on how much content they've like, so there's the 7-hour rule by, I think Ty Lopez popularized it, where, you know, that's how kind of long it takes to go from cold to sold. And if somebody's watched your content, I've had people like jump on a call and they're like, "Man, really like your content. Like, how can I work with you?" Whereas with you know, a cold prospect, it's kind of, you know, sometimes a bit hostile, like, okay, you know, pitch me sort of thing. You know, they're not like that exactly, but it's just a very, very different scenario.
Totally.
I think people or founders or marketers, I think a sort of something holding them back when it comes to content is the fact that you can't, it's really hard for us to measure the impact of this, right? Like I don't necessarily know who's watching this, and I don't know if they liked it. Well, you can look at qualitative like comments and stuff like that, likes, but you know, if somebody shares this in like a Slack community or a Discord, maybe even like Twitter, you know, I can see that if I'm doing social monitoring, but it's very hard to like, you know, see the impact on like the dark social. I think that's what's holding a lot of companies back from doing this is, you know, they've always just been incentivized by clear, you know, quantifiable art. Like I spend $1, I get $1 or $2 or $3 back. And then that in turn has like incentivized these short-term behaviors like, you know, ebook downloads and stuff like that. And so, yeah, I think the fact that content is a bit harder to measure has been holding some companies back. But fortunately, you know, talking about being contras, there's a few people who have been flying the flag. And, you know, although I'm a whisper compared to those people, it's something like, you know, that's one of my viewpoints, trying to really educate people on the impact of content and how, you know, although you might not be able to measure it as clear as everything else, like it is having like a positive impact on your business. And it's like, in my opinion, one of the most efficient ways to create demand.
You heard it here first. Content marketing makes you cheaper CPCs when you're doing paid ads. So
Yeah, yeah.
I mean, and of course, like, I don't know, man. Like, funny with these conversations, it's always just like there's always an aha moment that comes from it. And like you just being like, yeah, we see that like people that have content like engines for organic, like there's, cheaper ads when we run them. And it's like, of course it is, right? Like that audience is all something else too that we found interesting recently is like we've been just like DMing from like accounts that we have that are like have large followings, and the response rate is like so much higher when there's that social proof built in, right? And like when you
Mm.
contrast that to like cold email, like they have no idea who you are, right? So like there's no trust built into that. But if they're
Mm.
also getting served at like, we'll just say like this like display ads that are like videos, right, of you talking about something, and then they get a cold email from you, like they're going to be like, there's almost that social proof built into that. So like those things are kind of related in a way where it's like the social media fault. I didn't want to do anything on LinkedIn, but like decided Q4 of last year that I needed to do. And because it's like our audience like spends time there. And like what like we found is that like the account, and it's largely just because like the account I had there was small, and like the reception of reaching out cold to somebody was way
Mm.
less than if I have like 10,000 followers or whatever, right? Like my Twitter's way bigger,
Yeah.
and so it's like way easier to do this type of shit. But
It's,
anyways,
it's it's crazy. Social
yeah,
proof. What like it's like marketing fundamentals 101, right? Just human psychology. We like to follow the crowd, and I think bang on.
100%. Yeah, I think with the ROI thing too, I think we're going to see like it's not working like it was previously. Like I can't just turn on Google Ads and like I get leads now in the same way, you know? And so I think like for these people that were like really far on that side of the spectrum, like we have to have like everything be measurable. Like it's almost their back is against the wall now and they have to do something different. So I think this content thing is like you're going to see a ton of people like pivot into it because that's the only way for them to actually make like business impact, because the tactical things that they were doing previously, they aren't as effective as they were 5 years ago or 10 years ago, etc. So I'm curious to see, like, I mean, and we're just feeling that like with a lot of the like clients that we're talking to, like they're like, yo, we have to scale this up because this is the only way that we can actually like connect and communicate with this audience. But
Mm.
I just kind of find that interesting that it's like it's almost like this like total reversal. Like we went like really heavy on analytics, and now it's like we're going like very like almost like back to where we were previously, right? Where like analytics are less important. We're just trying to like be in front of people as much as we can, like educating them and like building relationships. So
Well,
yeah,
I think part of the problem there, right, is marketers trying being control freaks, and like I want
yeah,
complete visibility. I want to see every touch. And we just know that's impossible today, right? And it's going to get even harder. And you just need to go back to like kind of first principles ish, right? Like why does the business exist, or why are we doing marketing in the first place, right? And it's for business outcomes. It's to generate more pipeline, which hopefully turns into paying customers. And so, you can just measure that. And there's things you can put in place like self-reported attribution. So just when somebody signs up to your product, asking them, hey, where did you hear from us? And like a free form field. And they might say, oh, I watched like a podcast of yours, right? Google Analytics is never going to track that. And so then you can store that in your CRM and run a report of, okay, well, where was the, demand created? Like they might have clicked a Google ad and then gone to our website and booked a demo, and that's where the demand was captured. But it was the podcast that created it. And so let's invest more into the podcast. Whereas if you just looked at Google Analytics or your analytics tool, it would all say Google ads. And so you'd be putting money into Google ads when it's actually this thing over here that is getting people into your funnel. So there's ways around it, but yeah, I think
1,000%.
it's so cliche because I feel like with these things, it's just always going back to fundamentals. It's like, I think it's just a mindset
Totally.
switch of what really matters here. Do we need to obsess over, having this complete visibility, even though it's potentially affecting the growth of the business because it means we're focusing on like the wrong things. So yeah, it's tough because probably the people in charge of these things, their incentive, their commissions, their bonuses are kind of weighted based on, these analytics.
Yeah, based on like or whatever, right? Like
yeah.
Which
Yeah,
is
exactly.
a bullshit number. It doesn't that doesn't actually directly like correlate to revenue a lot of the time. So yeah, totally. Well, man, this has been awesome. Thank you again for coming on. Stoked to connect. And yeah, where can people find you if they want to learn more about what you're doing?
Yeah, likewise. So you can find me Liam Dunn on LinkedIn.com is my agency's website, but probably a better way is I'm going to be doing write-ups on go-to-market efficiency, like how you can build these go-to-market motions every Friday at efficient-growth.com. So I'm going to be doing in-depth write-ups every Friday there.
Love it. Yeah, we'll include those in the show notes as well so that people can find those more easily. And thanks again, man. Super stoked to have you. So,
All right, man. Cheers. All the best.